I woke up sprawled across the yellow line of a busy Canadian road, my new mountain bike pinning my legs to the pavement. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My arms, my knees, even the side of my face were scraped raw as if I'd been dragged over gravel for blocks. But when I looked down, my neon green shorts and tank top were spotless. No dirt, no rips, nothing that matched the state of my body. I pushed the bike off and stumbled to the sidewalk, dazed, trying to piece together what had happened. Cars honked in the distance, but no one slowed. I remembered leaving my sister's house at exactly 2:05 that afternoon, glancing at the kitchen clock before I rode away. But when I finally made it to my front yard, my mother and sister ran out in tears. My father and brothers weren't even home. They were still out searching for me. Because it wasn't a few minutes past 2 when I walked in. It was 7 o'clock at night. 5 hours were gone, and no one, family, neighbors, even the police, could explain where I had been. Hi, it's me. And what you just heard was only a fragment from one of the letters I received this week. A letter out of Canada, where life looks safe on the surface, but the stories people send me tell a different truth. Tonight, I'll be sharing several of those stories. They're unsettling, they're real, and I need to warn you, some of them involve children. If you're not ready to hear that, I understand. But for everyone else, stay with me. Lock your doors, check your windows, and keep the lights on. Because the people who wrote these letters thought they were safe, too. Now, let's begin. The circling car. My name is Alyssa, and if we'd sat in that park 1 minute longer, I might not be here to tell you this. This happened in Canada, in a major city I won't name. For privacy, I've changed our names. My ex, let's call him Caden, forgot his house keys. It was just after 2 a.m. We'd taken an Uber from my grandmother's place, and were at his front door when he realized. Neither of us wanted to call another ride. There was a small neighborhood park 2 minutes away, so I said we should sit there and figure it out. We sat on the old metal teeter-totters. The air had that heavy, wrong stillness you only feel when the city pretends to sleep. The park sat off a short spur road branching from a main avenue. Think of a tiny housing complex, one dead end on the left where the park lived, another on the right, both feeding back to the same mouth onto the main road. One way in, one way out. 5 minutes in, a black sedan slid off the avenue and into the complex. Every window was blacked out, mirror dark. It rolled past us to the dead end, turned, drifted to the opposite spur, turned again. Then it came back, slow, like a shark testing a dock. I felt that cold rope pull tight in my stomach. Caden must have felt it too. He leaned close without moving his lips. Get up. Start walking. We stood and speed-walked toward the roundabout near the mouth of the complex. Gravel whispered under our shoes. The sedan stopped. All 4 windows dropped. In the dark interior I saw shapes, 2, maybe 3 men. One of them called out, almost playful. Yo, where you from? If you know certain parts of Canada, you know that question is not small talk. It's bait. We didn't answer. We didn't look back. Doors opened, hard, fast. Footsteps hit the pavement. We broke into a run. The kind of run where your body is sprinting before your brain says go. Caden cut left, using the playground equipment as cover. Behind us, a voice cursed, breath hot and close. I heard the wet crunch of loose gravel under shoes that weren't ours. The streetlight blinked, and, in that strobing dark, something thin and red slid across the ground by my shoes, a laser dot skating over pebbles. It zipped across Caden's calf, then winked onto the rubber of the slide. Maybe it was a level on a tool. Maybe it wasn't. Don't stop, Caden said. His voice wasn't loud, just final. We shot out of the park, over the curb, across the main road without checking for cars. Horns flashed by in shouts of light. We cut between 2 houses and vaulted a chain-link fence. I tore the skin on my palm on a twisted wire. Blood made my fingers slippery on my phone screen. I dialed 911 and dropped the phone twice. When the dispatcher answered, my voice came out in pieces. I gave the cross streets. I said, "Black sedan, full tint, 3 males, they asked where we're from, there's a laser." The operator asked if we were safe. I didn't know what to say. Safe didn't feel like a word you could use anymore. We crouched behind a cedar hedge in someone's backyard where lawn chairs ghosted in the dark. Every sound, the thump of bass from a distant car, the metallic tick of an engine cooling, felt like footsteps closing in. Red and blue finally washed the fences. By the time the cruiser made a slow loop through the complex, the sedan was gone. The officer's questions were calm, rehearsed. Did we know the men? No. Did they say anything else? No. Weapons? I think a laser, I said, and hated how small that sounded. He told us to avoid the area at night for a while. He took our statements beside the cruiser's headlights, pencils and radios crackling. We pointed out the loops the car had made and the single exit, how it pinned us in. The officer nodded, said they'd run plate readers on nearby cameras and swing extra patrols past the complex. Caden's neighbor let us cut through their kitchen to the street. At the door, my hand shook so badly I left a rusty fingerprint on the frame. We didn't talk much after. We just sat on his steps and waited for his brother to bring the spare key. When I finally crawled into bed, the scene replayed in loops. The circling sedan. The windows gliding down. The question, "Where are you from?" Like a hook thrown from a boat. The red dot skating along the ground, alive on its own. I thought of how thin a laser is and how easy it would be to pretend it meant nothing. I thought of how easy it would have been to keep sitting under that failing bulb. People love to say, "Trust your gut." They never tell you the part after, the part where you do, and you still feel like the world shifted into a version where the rules are different and doors open you didn't know were there. Here's the part that keeps me up. 2 nights later, walking home from a late shift, I saw a black sedan idling half a block from my building, engine low, windows dark. Maybe it wasn't them. Maybe it was. I crossed the street and it didn't move. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself a lot of things. Canada looks safe on the surface, but danger hides in the most ordinary places. If you think being chased at night is terrifying, wait until you hear what happened to a child who thought she was just buying ice cream. The Predator in the Ice Cream Truck. My name is Rachel, I'm 22 now and living in Toronto. But the story I'm about to share happened 10 years ago, when I was only 12. I don't share my real name for obvious reasons, and I've changed a few details for privacy, but what I lived through still follows me every single day. Back then, I was a quiet, awkward kid in a small town 2 hours outside Toronto. School had just ended for summer break, and my friend, let's call her Maya, had made plans with me to go to the park. She was popular, younger than me, and half the time she would cancel to be with other friends. That day, she canceled at the very last minute. I had already walked almost an hour from my house to the park, so I stayed there by myself, kicking around the swings. That's when I heard the jingling music of an ice cream truck. For any kid, that sound is magic. I ran over, clutching a few coins, and asked for a milkshake. The driver, a man in his 30s or 40s, smiled and said, "Don't worry about paying, it's on me." I thought I'd just gotten lucky. He asked why I was alone, and when I explained, he told me to hop inside for a minute, see the controls, play the jingles, sit in the driver's seat. To 12-year-old me, it felt like the best summer day imaginable. That was the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept running into him. He would wave me over, offer free ice cream, tell me funny stories. I started to trust him. He was an adult who seemed to treat me like a friend. I never told my parents, why would I? He didn't seem dangerous. But slowly, he started crossing lines. First, he put his hand on my shoulder too long. then on my thigh. He gave me tight hugs. He asked strange questions, what color underwear I wore, whether I wanted to see his private parts. Every alarm bell inside me was screaming, but I convinced myself he was just being weird, not dangerous. I was wrong. One day, he asked me to undress. He told me it was normal between friends. I refused at first, but he kept pushing, using the kind of tone that makes a kid freeze. That summer turned into a nightmare. He touched me in ways I didn't understand, ways I never wanted. I felt sick, but I didn't tell anyone. Shame and fear are powerful cages. The last day I ever saw him, everything escalated. I told him I didn't want to keep playing. His smile dropped. He grabbed me, furious, and forced himself against me. I screamed, begged him to stop. He didn't. And in the blur of panic and fury, I saw a knife on the counter of the truck. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed it, and when he turned toward me, laughing, I drove the blade straight into his groin. He collapsed, crying, clutching himself, asking why. I didn't wait for an answer. I ran. I bolted from that truck, sprinted across the lot, and into the woods until my lungs burned and I blacked out under a tree. When I woke up, hours had passed. I walked home in a haze and never told anyone what really happened. Not my parents. Not Maya. Not the police. I just carried it inside me, like a sickness that never healed. Even now, a decade later, I hear an ice cream truck's tune and my chest tightens. My psychiatrist says it's PTSD. I've told a few close friends. I try to remind myself it wasn't my fault. But the regret gnaws at me. What if he went on to hurt other kids because I stayed silent? What if he never faced justice? Sometimes I dream about seeing his face again, older, colder, and waking up drenched in fear. I'm still learning how to live with what happened. Therapy helps. Speaking it aloud helps. But the scars don't fade, not the ones on the body or the ones inside the mind. Canada has this image of being safe, polite, ordinary. But predators don't care about borders or reputations. They hide in the places kids feel most comfortable, in playgrounds, in neighborhoods, even in something as innocent as an ice cream truck. And if you think that's disturbing, imagine losing not just your innocence, but hours of your life, with no memory of where you were or what happened to you. That's exactly what the next story is about. "5 hours gone. My name is Daniel, and what happened to me in 1999 still doesn't make sense. I was 12 years old, living in Brandon, Manitoba, Canada. It was spring, bright and windy, and my only real responsibility was babysitting my niece and nephew whenever my sister needed a break. She lived just 3 blocks away on the same busy street, so I'd ride my brand new mountain bike to her house without thinking twice. On that Saturday morning, she asked me to watch the kids while she did some shopping. I was happy to, anything to ride that bike in my neon green shorts and matching tank top. By noon I'd been with the kids for a few hours. When my sister came home, I hopped on my bike. It was exactly 2:05 p.m. I remember looking at the clock on her microwave before I left. The next thing I remember? Waking up on the middle yellow line of that same busy road. My bike lay across my legs. Cars honked in the distance, but none were close. My arms, my knees, even the side of my face were covered in what looked like road rash, scraped raw, like I'd been dragged across gravel. Yet my clothes were spotless. Not a single tear, not a smudge of dirt. And strangest of all, I felt no pain. The scrapes were there, rough under my fingertips, but they didn't hurt. I stumbled to the sidewalk, dazed, and walked my bike the rest of the block to my house. I expected my mom to scold me for being late. Instead, she burst into tears. Behind her, my sister looked pale, frantic. My dad and brothers weren't even home, they were out searching for me. Because it wasn't 2:10 when I walked in. It was 7 o'clock at night. 5 hours had passed, and I had no idea where I'd been. The police were called. They asked me over and over, "Who took you? Did someone drug you? Did you fall?" My answers never changed. I didn't remember. I just remembered riding away from my sisters, then opening my eyes on the pavement. Blood work showed no drugs or alcohol. My bike was flawless, no bent tires, no scratches. My clothes were bright and clean. Yet my body looked like I'd slid down 100 feet of gravel. Neighbors swore they hadn't seen me. Patrol cars had passed that road dozens of times while I was missing. No one ever saw a boy in neon green lying there. Doctors cleaned my wounds, waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. They dabbed with alcohol, pressed bandages down. Still no pain. Just emptiness. For weeks afterward, I woke up at night drenched in sweat. Sometimes I'd see a flash of light in my dreams, hear a low humming like a generator, then silence. Therapy, hypnosis, even guided meditation, none of it has brought the memories back. To this day, there's a blank space where those 5 hours should be. I never rode a bike again. I never even stayed in Brandon. Within a year, my family moved, and I refused to set foot in that city again. I tell myself it was just some strange blackout, maybe even a medical episode. But deep down, I don't believe that. The wounds, the missing time, the way nobody saw me, none of it adds up. Call it aliens. Call it supernatural. Call it whatever you want. But 5 hours of my life vanished, and no one can explain why. And if you think the unknown is terrifying, imagine when the danger is all too real. Because while Daniel lost hours he'll never get back, another student in Canada was losing something else entirely: her safety, every time she stepped onto a bus. The man on my bus. My name is Emily, and when I was 18, fresh out of high school and starting my first year at university in Ontario, I learned how terrifying everyday life can become. During my very first week, I noticed him. A guy in his early 20s who always got on the same bus as me, around the same time, at the same stop. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. Sometimes he stared, sometimes he gave me a faint smile. I ignored it. One afternoon, while I was waiting at the stop near my house, he came up behind me. "Hey, you're in the Indigenous Studies class, right?" "I'm in that class too." Relieved to recognize someone from my course, I nodded. We chatted on the ride. He said his name was Ryan and that he was 5 years older. It felt strange, me just starting out, him already more experienced and mature, but I convinced myself he was just being friendly. From then on, Ryan always sat next to me. Sometimes he filled the ride with endless chatter, showing me videos on his phone. Other times, he stayed silent, just staring. Both versions made me uncomfortable. After a week, he asked for my Snapchat to talk about assignments. Against my better judgment, I gave it. The first snap wasn't about class. It was a selfie of him at a bar at 1 in the morning, asking me to pick him up. I said no. His response was anger, insults. After that, his messages turned darker. He asked me to come over to hook up just once, then demanded nudes. He told me I was cute and tiny, and that guys like him could teach me things. I blocked him. But you can't block someone from a bus seat. Every time I tried to sit alone, he would follow and drop down beside me. His hand brushed my arm, then my thigh. I froze, afraid of how he might react if I told him to stop. He started following me off the bus, trailing me all the way to my parents' driveway, asking to come inside. I lied and said my parents didn't allow visitors. That excuse kept him out of my house, but not out of my life. By my second semester, my schedule changed. For a while, I didn't see him, and I finally started to breathe again. But the next fall, at the start of my second year, I logged into the campus platform and found a message waiting. It was from Ryan. He had dug through our old course page to find me. He wrote that he'd seen me again, and wanted me to add him back on Snap. I ignored it. Days later, he found me on Instagram. I blocked him. Then I saw him again in person, on the bus, sliding into the seat beside me as if nothing had ever happened. His hand pressed against my leg while he smiled. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to stop unless I changed my own routine. By then, I had started dating someone, and whenever our schedules matched, he drove me to campus. Slowly, I stopped taking the bus. That was the only thing that finally cut Ryan off. But the fear lingered. Even walking across campus, I caught myself searching the crowd for his face, bracing for his voice. A daily bus ride, something so normal, so ordinary, had become a trap. And when I think back, what unsettles me most isn't just Ryan's persistence. It's how easy it was for him to hide behind the appearance of being a fellow student, blending into my world until it was too late. Canada may look safe, predictable, polite. But when someone decides you're their target, no public space can protect you, not even a crowded bus. And if that isn't chilling enough, imagine when the threat doesn't come from a stranger on public transit, but from someone dressed in a suit, handing you a business card, promising you a glamorous career. Because the next story is about a young woman lured into a hotel room by the promise of becoming a model. The modeling trap. My mom's name is Laura, and when she was 19, she moved from Saskatchewan to Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, to live with her aunt and uncle and work for a small office downtown. She thought she was stepping into adulthood, chasing independence. Instead, she nearly walked into something much darker. The office was on the top floor of a 3-story building. A cafe was located on the same level, so strangers often wandered past reception to grab coffee. Whenever the receptionist took her lunch break, Laura was asked to cover the desk. That's where she first met him. A sharply dressed man in his 40s, Middle Eastern by appearance, stepped up to the desk. He smiled, complimented her looks, and asked if she'd ever considered modeling. He claimed he worked for a company a few floors down. He even handed her a business card. Nothing about him seemed unusual. When she told her aunt and mother, they urged her to check with the Better Business Bureau. The company was real, listed and active. Encouraged, Laura met him again the next day. This time, he invited her to lunch at the Fairmont Hotel just down the street. He said he had a briefcase full of information to show her, but it would be more private in his hotel room. She hesitated, but he was persuasive. He smiled, told her she had a bright future, that this was her chance. She convinced herself it was safe. After all, her coworkers knew where she was going, and the hotel was public. At the front desk, the clerk gave him a strange look as he checked in. No briefcase, no portfolio. Still, Laura followed him upstairs. Inside the room, she sat in a chair by the window while he lay back on the bed, hands folded behind his head. His eyes never left her. He began with flattery. "What's your dream car? How much would you like to earn?" He told her she could afford anything within months if she joined his modeling program. Then his pitch grew darker. She wouldn't just wear clothing, she would wear lingerie, stand behind partitions while buyers from around the world placed bids. Finally, he asked her to undress. He insisted he needed to see her body before he could proceed. When she refused, he told her to go into the bathroom, wrap herself in a towel, and come out just once. Against every instinct, she did. As she stood there, clutching the towel, he picked up the phone and started speaking in another language, laughing. He waved for her to spin around while he kept talking. That was the breaking point. Laura bolted back into the bathroom, dressed quickly, and ran out of the room without looking back. He didn't chase her. He just stood and smirked in the doorway as she fled down the hall. Back at work, she told her coworkers what happened. They urged her to go to the police, but she was humiliated, too embarrassed to admit how far she'd let it go. A week later, she arrived at the office to find police cars outside. The man had been arrested for solicitation of prostitution. Relief swept over her, until 2 weeks later, when she left work through the alley where she parked her car. He was there, sitting in a vehicle, staring at her with that same smirk. Out on bail. Laura ran to her car, locked the doors, and sped away. That was the last time she ever saw him. Within a month, she quit her job and moved back home. The dream of independence had curdled into fear. It's been decades, but when she tells me this story, I can still hear the tremor in her voice. She says the scariest part wasn't the hotel room, or the towel, or the phone call in another language. It was how normal he seemed at first. How easy it was for her to believe the card, the compliments, the promise of something better. That was the last story for tonight. 5 Canadian horror stories. A car that circled at 2 a.m. An ice cream truck that hit a predator. 5 missing hours with no explanation. A stalker on the bus. And a false promise of modeling. Stay sharp, trust your instincts, and remember, safety is never guaranteed. Let me know what you think in the comments. This was Tell Me What Happened. I'll see you in the next story.